Here we are with another edition of Talking Sports with the Legend. Today's guest, Marc Zumoff, the Philadelphia 76ers announcer for the television audience.
Yes, sir. What's up, buddy? Thanks for coming on, man.
My pleasure.
Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, and when I was a kid, my first love, believe it or not, was 76ers basketball. My father took me to the old Philadelphia arena, and I saw the Sixers when they first moved from Syracuse in 1963. And shortly after that, I started turning the sound down of the TV and doing games into a tape recorder. And one day dreamt that I would be the voice of the 76ers, and I can't tell you how lucky I am to have done that.
Where did you go? What was your major in college?
I majored in television, radio, and film. I got my degree from Temple. I can't say that while I was at Temple that I ever imagined that I'd be doing what I've been doing the last 27 years. I thought that I would have to go into a different field entirely. I ended up getting into the business as a newscaster and slowly but surely worked my way up.
Stop for a couple minutes. What was your first job?
My first job was in Trenton, New Jersey. I was a newscaster, and they had what they called back then a teletype. And basically, that was a big machine that just printed out the news of the day. And I literally would rip the copy from the teletype and would read the news on the radio. They paid me $110 a week, and they were 6 weeks behind in my pay. But when I finally got my first paycheck, and I looked at it and I realized that they were paying me to talk on the radio, I knew that I'd be in the business for the rest of my life.
Steve, real quick, Steven, your grandfather, my father, used to fix teletype machines. That's what my dad did when he got out of the Navy. My dad retired from the Navy in 1971, and he worked for RCA out of the Navy, and everybody couldn't believe that my dad worked for RCA because they thought he had something to do with records. And I said, no, he fixes teletype machines, and people were kind of not familiar with what teletype machines were. But my dad, because he was in the Navy, he taught me this stuff, and he started doing that. And then my dad eventually started fixing computers, and he was a field technician his last job. Ain't that funny, Steve? See that? So sometimes.
So maybe I have him to thank.
That's right, the old teletype machine. That's what he used to do. He used to go around and repair them for the clients that had RCA, and then he went on to Western Union and MCI, and he had a lot of different companies he worked for, but all the same stuff. So, Mark, what year did you graduate from Temple, Mark?
Well, that's a trick question because I was due to graduate in 1977, but in my senior year, I had the opportunity to get some freelance work in broadcasting, and I was so enamored by that I'll be honest with you, I stopped going to class and I fell short of when I was supposed to graduate. But 15 years later, in 1992, I decided to finish my unfinished business. I went back, I took one course, and I got the rest of my credits through life experience, and got my degree in 1992.
Awesome.
Did you work for any other teams besides the Sixers?
That's a good question. I have done other sports. I've filled in for the Flyers and done hockey. I have done union soccer. I have done horse jumping. I've done rowing. I've done indoor box lacrosse and indoor soccer. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different sports.
Wow.
And I was really lucky in 2016. I had the opportunity to go to Rio and cover the women's basketball team and do their games for NBC.
Oh, that's awesome.
And how cool is that?
It was way too cool. I couldn't believe I was doing it. It was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Steven's a big fan of soccer.
Yeah.
He volunteers at Holy Family Women's Soccer Program as a volunteer assistant. And that was my favorite sport. And I know you follow it because I watch every Sixers game. And I love when you and Ali talk about the Premier League and all that stuff. And I just got done watching the Chelsea game. So I don't know who's your team for. Who do you root for in the Premier League, Mark?
Well, I will say that I'm rooting for Tottenham, but I have to tell you that Joel Embiid is a very big Real Madrid fan, so he is not going to be happy tonight.
Yeah, me and Steven like Liverpool, and a good friend of mine is a big Tottenham fan. When we were younger, the team we played for were called the Spurs, and he started following them when we got older because of the Tottenham Hotspurs name. So funny.
Yeah, it's a great sport, and I've been a Union season ticket holder ever since they came to town in 2010.
That's awesome. Yeah, Steven actually knew I played with a guy that played for the Kicks back in the first year the Kicks were here. And I remember you announcing games because when Steven asked you that question, I knew that you did soccer from the time. One time I was watching the Union game on TV and you were on, and I definitely remember you doing the indoor games because that's back when I was in high school and college.
Well, I got to tell you, if you remember the Philadelphia Fever,
Yep.
you got a good memory.
Yes, I had a lot of friends that played on the guys that played on that team. Ed Sheridan was from our neighborhood, and Dave McWilliams.
Sure.
Yeah, Dave McWilliams, the guy who eventually became the coach. Steve, I'm going to put the stop to it and then restart it. Great story for you about Dave McWilliams. When Dave invited me down to the after the game down to the bar, the Bully. Remember Bully's Bar? The Broad Street Bullies Bar down underneath the Spectrum. So he invited me. And Steven and my wife down to the bar after the game. So I introduced Steven to Dave. And after that game, 2 days later, he got fired. So yes, and a couple years later.
He did well as the Temple coach for a long time.
Yes, he did. That's what I was going to say. He was coaching Temple, and a good friend of mine was the assistant coach at St. Joe's, and we took him out, and Dave came up and said, "Hey, I remember you. I got fired right after I met you." Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Who was your favorite athlete to interview?
Well, there are a lot of really good ones, I have to tell you. Certainly, I enjoyed Charles Barkley because he always said things that made people take notice. Allen Iverson, when he interviewed with me, was absolutely terrific because he was always very thoughtful. I think a lot of our guys right now are really good because they're not only very thoughtful, but certainly very focused, and they've been great to talk to this year. The only problem is I can't talk to them in person. I have to talk to them either over Zoom or over TV.
Did you play sports as a kid?
Yes, but nothing serious. I never made any teams. I wasn't much of an athlete. I was kind of a late bloomer, and I didn't become any kind of an athlete until later on. So I never played organized sports. Maybe 1 year a little league, and maybe later on I played some softball. But other than that, I never did.
Mark, Steve bypassed your high school. What high school did you go to?
So I went to George Washington in the Northeast.
Oh, yeah.
And they were a junior, senior high back then. So I was there from 7th through 12th grade and graduated in 73.
Steve, did you hear that? He went from 7th all the way to 12th because back then, George Washington, they did junior high, which was 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then, 10th, 11th, and 12th was the senior, like the
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, so that means Mark's older than me, and he already told everybody he's older than me because he said he went to see the Sixers play in '63, and that's the year I was born. So I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I met you one time at the what are your Special Olympics unified game?
I remember that might have been at George Washington.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, Steven got your picture, and he sent it to me, and he goes, "This is Marc Zumoff, ain't it?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "We were a good friend of ours is John Creighton, and he's now the athletic director at William Tennant, and he was working for George Washington at the time. Now he is. He was working at George Washington
No,
at the
he was
time.
at like Central, I think, at the time. He wasn't at Washington,
He was. I thought he was in charge of the Unified Games.
but not a.
Oh, he just did it at Washington? No, he definitely did it at Washington, Steve. He worked there.
But the year that I met Mark there.
I apologize for not getting that right. I'm sorry, Mark. As you can see, Steven's always right. I apologize. Move on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He's on it.
Yes, he is.
It's tough to get one by on him.
Oh, never, ever. Go ahead, Steve.
Last question. If you could have dinner with 3 people who work in sports or athletes or coaches, who would they be and why?
3 people?
Yeah.
I'd like to have dinner with Adam Silver because he's really smart and has done a great job with the NBA. I would like to have dinner with Tom Brady because even though I hate the Patriots, I admire the fact that he has done what he has done and is still going strong into his 40s. And probably would like to have dinner with, well, he's not with us anymore, but Will Chamberlain.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was, when I was growing up, he was the man. And they changed the game for him. That's how good he was. And I want to know what it was like to score 100 points in a professional game.
Also, Steve, everybody doesn't know this, but Will Chamberlain was a great athlete. He was track and field star. He also was a great volleyball player. He retired early from basketball, and then he became a professional volleyball player out in Los Angeles.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, he was one of the greatest athletes of all time. All time. Well, Mark, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with us. We really appreciate it, and hopefully someday we'll get to meet you and interview you face to face once all this pandemic's over with.
It's my pleasure, Steve. Thanks for reaching out.